Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our brand new legal breaking reporting video analysis update for the evening of, the first one for the evening of Monday 19, 2026. We've got some good ones for you guys this evening. Let's get into these reportings. The first one, ladies and gentlemen, is by the New York Times, read by an automated voice. So we will be taking looks, reads, as well as listens. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into them.
Man acquitted of shining a laser at Marine One with Trump aboard. This article is by Alexandra E. Petrie and read by an automated voice. A Washington man who was accused of aiming a laser pointer at Marine One, the presidential helicopter, as it was leaving the White House in September with President Trump aboard, was acquitted on Tuesday, according to court documents. A jury found the man, Jacob Samuel Winkler, 33, not guilty after just 35 minutes of deliberation, lawyers representing Mr. Winkler said. Alexis Gardner, a federal public defender for Mr. Winkler, called the case a clear example of misuse of prosecutorial discretion. She said federal resources were spent charging a man whose alleged weapon was a cat toy keychain, adding that it was time and money diverted from real public safety threats. Their verdict confirmed what should have been obvious from the start. Mr. Winkler committed no crime, and this prosecution was an unjust exercise of power, she added. Federal prosecutors who tried the case did not immediately respond to requests for comment on Sunday. The White House also did not respond to a request for comment on Sunday. Mr. Winkler was arrested in September and charged with pointing a laser at an aircraft, a federal felony. When a laser pointer reaches a cockpit, the light can disorient or completely incapacitate a pilot, the Federal Aviation Administration has said. According to a criminal complaint, Mr. Winkler was standing on the sidewalk on Constitution Avenue when a uniformed Secret Service officer saw him shine a red laser beam at the president's helicopter, which was flying at a low altitude during its initial ascent from the south grounds of the White House. Mr. Trump was traveling to Virginia to give a speech. The complaint said Mr. Winkler had also pointed the laser at the uniformed Secret Service officer before directing it at the helicopter. Mr. Winkler appeared to have done so in retaliation for the officer pointing his flashlight at him, according to the complaint, which said that the officer was trying to observe him because he was being loud, talking to himself, and did not have a shirt on. After the jury's verdict, Judge Beryl A. Howell of the United States District Court for the District of Columbia ordered Mr. Winkler acquitted, discharged, and any bond exonerated, according to court records. The verdict represented a setback for Jeanine Pirro, the U.S. Attorney in Washington, who has adopted the administration's aggressive approach to combating street crime in the city and on those who defy federal crackdowns. In November, a jury acquitted a man charged with misdemeanor assault after throwing a sandwich at an armed federal officer.
A blatant misuse and abuse of federal law by the Trump administration. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into our second reporting by a juicy reporting that I found out about just today, ladies and gentlemen. That reporting reads, as of January 2026, reports indicate Donald Trump continues to suggest military action, including invasion, to acquire Greenland for strategic reasons, despite strong opposition from Denmark, its sovereign and NATO allies, with some Republicans expressing concern, while he also threatens economic pressure like tariffs, Concurrently, calls for investigations into his fitness to serve have emerged from various quarters, including former officials and critics, in response to these escalating, often unpredictable actions and statements, creating significant international and internal debate within the U.S. Greenland. Trump has not rolled out military force to control Greenland, a Danish territory. Denmark and NATO oppose annexation. Some Republicans have expressed concern. Critics say the stance is erratic and damaging to alliances. Trump has threatened tariffs on Nordic countries. There are calls for an investigation into Trump's fitness for office. This is part of a foreign policy focusing on resource-rich territories. It has sparked debates about international law, NATO's future, and presidential authority. Ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, let's get into our third reporting by The Hill, read by an automated voice. So, we will be taking a look, a read, as well as a listen. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, lastly, if you have not subscribed already, if you haven't, or if you've enjoyed this reporting thus far, please subscribe, like the video, keep the YouTube algorithm up, and more. Let's get into it. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's turn it over to The Hill.
A little bit less than that. GOP's culture of rebellion in slim majority imperils Johnson agenda. By Emily Brooks and Mike Lewis. Speaker Mike Johnson's Republican from Louisiana job, managing the House GOP's paper-thin majority, is getting only more difficult in the new year, with a culture of rebellion and a perfect storm of external political factors, threatening to derail the party's agenda, just as Republicans are gearing up for a tough midterm cycle. In the earliest days of the new session, Johnson and his leadership team have already had to swallow passage of Obamacare subsidies, a vote forced by a handful of GOP mavericks, then watched in helpless frustration as some of those same centrist rebels blocked a series of Republican labor bills that were expected to pass easily and return some wind back in the party's sails. It has now become acceptable to use your leverage, because it is a slim majority, to kind of just shift last minute, shift the House, one way or another. Representative Mario Diaz-Balart, Republican from Florida, a senior appropriator, said of the dynamic. And the way to change that, increase the numbers, Diaz-Balart said. That will not be easy. The struggle to pass even partisan messaging bills has not only highlighted the internal divisions within the restive Republican conference, but also forecasts a stormy election year for GOP leaders, who are already fighting the headwinds of an unpopular president, a volatile economy, and historic midterm trends, which predict losses for the party that controls the White House. Last week, the Cook Political Report, an independent election forecaster, shifted its ratings of 18 seats, all of them in favor of Democrats. Democrats have been only happy to underline the GOP's troubles, saying Republicans have reached a level of dysfunction that makes them incapable of addressing the challenges facing working-class Americans who are struggling economically. This group of people, they do not know how to organize a two-car funeral. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, told reporters last week in the Capitol. They are losing votes week after week after week. The whole thing is falling apart. It is not that there have been no victories. Johnson did succeed, with some assists from President Trump, in rallying the conference around key priorities last year, despite grumbling from the various wings of the party. That list includes passage of the GOP's One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which combined a host of Trump's most prominent campaign promises, including sweeping tax cuts, into one massive package that became law on the 4th of July. Yet Republicans have had trouble selling that legislation to voters. One reason is that the tax cuts were largely an extension of existing law, meaning they were imperceptible to most people. While many Republicans are pushing for another party-line GOP spending bill this year, many of them doubt they can get the near-universal agreement they need to pass it. Facing tough re-election contests, a large and growing number of vulnerable Republicans have shown an increasing willingness to go their own way for the sake of political preservation, even when it is meant defying GOP leaders on major issues such as Obamacare and the Jeffrey Epstein files. The frequency of rebellion is amping up. Nearly every legislative week, GOP leaders have seen the House floor stalled or derailed as small groups of members flex their power. Those detractors are often members of the right-wing House Freedom Caucus, which is known for such tactics. In recent weeks, those members have held up procedural votes as they demand amendment votes on funding bills. And in one instance, got leaders to strip an earmark for a community organization in Representative Ilhan Omar's Democrat from Minnesota district. But revolts against leadership are increasingly coming from the other side of the ideological spectrum, with moderate members in highly competitive districts joining with Democrats to force a vote on extending Obamacare subsidies and to sink one GOP labor bill, prompting leaders to pull 3 more labor bills that were teed up for the week. It is a delicate balance for moderate swing district members, such as Representative Rob Bresnahan, Republican from Pennsylvania, a first-term lawmaker who signed the discharge petition to force a vote on the Obamacare subsidies and also voted against the labor bill. Unlike Freedom Caucus members from deep red districts, those moderates rely on national party structures to boost their re-election bids, but it can also help to look like they are not in lockstep with Republican leaders. Bresnahan said he has had conversations with all the GOP leaders and understands their concerns, particularly about the discharge petition. But the choice, he said, was clear. I represent northeastern Pennsylvania and nobody else, so that is where my loyalty lies, Bresnahan said. If it means deciding between, party leadership or my district, it is my district 100% of the time. The defections so far have been limited, in most cases, to handfuls of defiant Republicans. That is largely because Trump, while unpopular nationally, still commands a firm grip on congressional Republicans, many of whom fear a primary challenge if they break with the president too frequently. But that might soon change, according to some Republicans, when the primary season ends. One of the reasons they are attacking me and putting so much money into my race is to keep the others in line. And so far it is working, said Representative Thomas Massey, Republican from Kentucky, whose willingness to defy the president on major issues like Epstein have earned him a Trump-backed primary challenge. But maybe once we get past May 19th, and my colleagues get past their own primaries, they can start voting for their constituents and the Constitution. The early resignation of former Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican from Georgia, on January 5th, and sudden death of Representative Doug LaMalfa, Republican from California, the following day put even more pressure on GOP leaders. House Republicans can now afford only 2 defections and still win any party-line vote, assuming all members are present and voting. That margin will temporarily dip down to 1 once a Democrat is sworn in after a Texas special election at the end of the month. Emphasis from leadership on attendance has resulted in ill and battered lawmakers making the trek to Washington when they otherwise would not have, since absences can make or break a vote. Representative Jim Baird, Republican from Indiana, who along with his wife was hospitalized after a car crash that his office said was a hit-and-run early this month, was present for votes this week, his neck in a brace, his face still black with bruises. Democrats have had their own problems with absences, stemming from both health issues and races for different offices. It has prompted concerns from Democratic leaders who are urging members to get to the Capitol, especially for the big votes. When we have important votes that affect the American public, we expect members to be here, Representative Pete Aguilar, California, head of the House Democratic Caucus, said earlier in the month. We expect members to be here on time. Republican leaders have brushed off the losses on the House floor as just a reality of the slim House majority. House Republican Conference Chair Lisa McClain, Michigan, the number 4 Republican in charge of messaging for the House GOP, said she does not even view recent incidents as rebellion. I just see it as, that is what happens when you have 1-seat majority. Everything has to be amplified, right? McClain said. Everything that used to be kind of a given. I do not want to say that, but the details, there is just zero room for error. There is just zero room for error. Even Johnson, while leaving the House floor after moderates tanked the labor bill, insisted. We are totally in control of the House. This is life with a small margin. We are not deterred in any way, Johnson said. Trump also has acknowledged the difficulties of a slim majority. A lot of times they will say, I wish Mike were tougher. He is tough, Trump said in a speech to House Republicans earlier this month at the Kennedy Center. But you cannot be tough when you have a majority of 3, and now, sadly, a little bit less than that.
With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into our next reporting by some research that I did. That news reporting reads, on January 18, 2026, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents raided a home on the east side of St. Paul, Minneapolis, and detained an elderly U.S. citizen, Conley Scott Theo, while he was wearing only underwear and a blanket. Theo was escorted from his home in sub-zero temperatures. Video footage captured him wearing only underwear, Crocs, and a blanket on what was described as a frigid Sunday morning. Detainment agents reportedly broke the door and detained Theo in front of his 5-year-old grandson. He was questioned inside a federal vehicle for approximately 1 hour while agents ran his fingerprints. Theo was released and returned to his home after agents confirmed he was a naturalized citizen with no criminal record. ICE reportedly believed he matched the description of 2 convicted sex offenders, though Theo's family and St. Paul Mayor Kahoi Her stated those individuals do not reside at that address. The raid occurred during Operation Metro Surge, a highly intensity federal immigration crackdown in Minnesota. The operation has faced intense local criticism and local challenges following other high-profile incidents in January 2026. On January 8, 2026, an ICE agent fatally shot Renee Nicole Good, a 37-year-old woman in Minneapolis. On January 13, 2026, Alaya, Alaya, ladies and gentlemen, Raymond, a disabled U.S. citizen, was filmed being dragged from her car by ICE agents while on her way to a medical appointment. The ACLU of Minnesota filed a class action lawsuit on January 15, 2026, alleging that federal agents have engaged in racial profiling and unlawful arrests of citizens during the crackdown. Ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, let's get into our second to last but not least reporting for the first hour of the evening reportings for the 19th day of January 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, if you did enjoy this reporting and have been enjoying this reporting thus far, please like, comment, share, subscribe, as well as enjoy for more legal breaking news that you need to know about on the side of politics and more. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's turn it over to The Hill, read by an automated voice.
Trump's suspension of naturalization ceremonies leaves hopeful citizens in limbo. By Rebecca Bache. President Trump's decision to suspend naturalization ceremonies is leaving residents across the country in an unusual position, now stuck in limbo after they were on the verge of gaining U.S. citizenship. Critics say the pause is the Trump administration's latest form of collective punishment for migrants, who have seen their hopes of citizenship dashed following the deadly shooting of a National Guard member in Washington, D.C. On Thanksgiving, Trump said he would permanently pause migration from all third world countries in response to the shooting. The next week, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services suspended naturalization ceremonies for citizens of the 19 countries covered by the travel ban. It is a list that has since grown, as the president in December expanded the list to 39 countries. In some cases, immigrants have already passed the citizenship test, only to be blocked from taking the oath that makes their naturalization official. People are just somewhat confused and concerned that, although they sort of went through the process, with the exception of the actual ceremony, that now at the 11th hour. On the 9th inning, they are going to be disqualified and not allowed to be officially sworn in, said Representative Adriano Espaillat, Democrat from New York. Espaillat, who is a naturalized citizen himself, said his office has been flooded by those dealing with the uncertainty. They are in limbo, and I am sure there is a lot of stress. And they may feel they are Americans, but in actuality they are not, until they take that oath. The U.S. typically naturalizes about 800,000 new citizens per year, the bulk of which are from Mexico, India, and the Philippines. Naturalization candidates have been pulled from their scheduled citizenship ceremonies. I know this to be true because it happened to my constituents, who have reached out to my office. Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, said on the floor this week. They are rightfully upset that the administration has stopped them, individuals who are already approved for citizenship, from taking their oath of allegiance to this country. The Trump administration has said the move is needed to thoroughly vet immigrants before they become U.S. citizens. USCIS has paused all adjudications for aliens from high-risk countries, while USCIS works to ensure that all aliens from these countries are vetted and screened to the maximum degree possible. The pause will allow for a comprehensive examination of all pending benefit requests for aliens from the designated high-risk countries. A DHS spokesperson said in a statement, "The safety of the American people always come first, but immigration advocates say the claim simply does not make sense, as many prospective citizens have been in the U.S. for years if not decades, and have been vetted at every turn. They have not committed a crime, because otherwise they, would not have been eligible for citizenship anyway. They have then submitted their application for naturalization, paid the fee, found to be eligible because they took the citizenship test and the language test and passed everything," said Chev Daldani. They were at the final stage of, they are going to swear the oath of allegiance to the United States, and they are having the rug pulled out under them. So the rationale that the Trump administration is doing this because of security and vetting concerns does not hold up. They have been vetted numerous times throughout various administrations by multiple different government entities. The Trump administration has been under pressure from Congress to resume the ceremonies. Representative Pramila J. Apple, Democrat from Washington, also led a letter asking USCIS for a breakdown of how many people have been affected by the pause, how applicants are being re-reviewed, and for a timeline for lifting the pause. It is this terrible feeling that I am hearing from people across the country of, wait a second, I did everything the right way. I followed the process, I have done everything. I have been waiting all this time, and you get, It is such a privilege and an honor to become a U.S. citizen. I remember what it felt like to me that day, said J. Apple, herself an immigrant to the U.S. I just had butterflies in my stomach, First, I did not think I was going to be that affected. But I was in this room with people from all over. I am getting goosebumps right now. Just thinking about it, all over the world who had come from such different situations. I mean people who had really escaped a lot of trauma, war, economic issues. Some were coming to join their families. And so they were there with their loved ones. And it was just this amazing, beautiful feeling like, I did it, I made it. I went through all of this and I made it, and I remember just starting to cry. I was not expecting it at all, but I just started weeping, because it was just so beautiful and such a joyful moment. Daldani said many of those who are about to take the oath have already progressed through various immigration statuses, taking years to gain their green card, and then eventually seek citizenship. It is purely contradictory to our American values. We are a nation of immigrants. Like we are here because our forefathers are immigrants. And this is now saying you are not welcome here. Even though that is the foundation of this country, she said. Even though those not on the list of impacted countries are fearful to move forward. There have been reports of some residents who are from countries that are not on the travel ban list who have had their appointments canceled. And because other migrants have been arrested after immigration court hearings. Some are fearful to make appearances. Now I have got people saying to me, should I go to my naturalization ceremony? What if they grab me in my naturalization ceremony? It is really unprecedented, and it is attacking legal immigration. They have always said they want to attack undocumented immigrants, the so-called worst of the worst, J. Apple said. That is not these people.
Ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, let's get into our last reporting by some more research that I did find out about today. That reporting reads, on January 19, 2026, that is today, ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump amplified public demands for the imprisonment of journalist Don Lemon following an anti-ICE protest at a Minnesota church. On Truth Social, Trump reshared a post suggesting Lemon should serve a 40-year sentence in prison, similar to sentence is given to anti-abortion protesters under the Freedom of Access Act to clinic entrances. On Sunday, January 18, 2026, yesterday, ladies and gentlemen, Lemon was present at City's church in St. Paul, Minnesota, where anti-ICE protesters interrupted a service. Protesters allege the church's pastor was also an acting field officer director for ICE. Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights Harmeet Dillon stated that Lemons is on notice and under federal investigation. Officials are weighing charges under the FACE Act and the Ku Klux Klan Act for interfering with religious worship. Lemon maintains he was present solely as a journalist documenting a news event for his independent platform and was not a participant in the protest. He defended the event as a matter of First Amendment rights. Rapper Nicki Minaj publicly attacked Lemon, calling for him to be jailed and using inflammatory language on social media. Attorney General Pam Bondi stated the incident would be met with the full force of federal law, emphasizing the administration's commitment to prosecuting those who disrupt religious services. The protests in Minnesota have intensified following the recent death of Renee Good during an ICE enforcement action, which has led to increased tensions across the state. Ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, that is going to do it for this first hour and legal breaking reportings, video analysis updates for the evening of Monday, January 19, 2026. If you did enjoy this legal breaking reporting, video analysis updates, ladies and gentlemen, please like, comment, share, subscribe, as well as enjoy, and I will talk to you guys in about an hour and a half or so for more legal breaking news that you need to know about and more on the side of politics and more.